Well, Dave Ross, thank you so much for doing the Show Business podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
And the show right now is on which day?
Saturdays. Yeah.
So that didn't change.
That didn't change. Yeah, we just had our first one back. We're not doing one for Halloween weekend, but then we're just back on Saturdays, and it'll be fun, man.
It's a great venue. I think I did like one of my first shows. It wasn't Good Heroin, but I always want to call it Good Heroin. Maybe I'm do too much hip hop, but it was like one of the first places I ever did stand up, like in front of like a real audience.
Oh, really?
I think it was someone else's show there.
Yeah, sure.
But it was great.
Cool. Yeah, no, I love it there. It's great. And they really care. They built a stage back there. They they pay us out of the bar. It's great.
I had to go through the same thing with the Comedy Bunker. Like I moved it from Sherman Oaks to now. I kind of moved it to this place in Burbank, but I renamed it a different name because I thought like I'd have to start over from scratch, which I did audience-wise.
Yeah. And
then I'm like, well, maybe that was the wrong decision. And I also called it Latif and Friends, which I thought was good. But then after a while, I was like, I was always insecure or not sure if that's the right way to go. Yeah. So now I'm back with the Comedy Bunker name at Kibitz, which you did. And you did both. And they're very different shows. Like one's in a underground mansion. One is at
one's a bar show. Yeah.
But they're both good.
Yeah.
And some of our audience surprisingly did drive, and some of the audience is transferring, and we're gaining a new audience.
Good.
But there's a new magic that we've captured at this place that I really like.
Well, that is another thing I definitely have learned about myself. And I guess it's probably true for all people. We all just have a different shelf life with it. I need to end a thing and then move on to the next thing. And some things I have to fight that urge because, like, for example, a stand-up comedy career is a long-term investment, right? And I, especially in the pandemic, had a lot of like, fuck this. It's so hard and it hurts. And I need to do something that doesn't hurt this much.
Right.
But I'm not going to do that. I love it too much. With shows, it's tough because for me, it feels like you do something for 3 years that isn't just straight up you. It's like a show you created. Then just like put a cap on it, move on to the next thing. And that's part of what I'm going through with Good Heroin, where like I'm just
how many years in?
Well, without the pandemic, 5. Yeah. With the pandemic, about 7.
Wow.
And the thing is that like now that I know it's not going to grow to a new venue. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. If like I'm a real if you're not growing, you're dying kind of guy. And I feel it. I really feel it. Like I don't know if it's boredom or just kind of like I'm antsy or it makes me worried. But
it's kind of like, especially with the pandemic, like you kind of broke up with the show.
Yeah.
It was over.
Oh, sure.
The place was almost done, right? They almost went out of business.
Yes.
They had a fundraiser I saw at one point.
Yeah.
And now you're like, all right, well, I guess we'll get back together. Right. And so in some ways it's a step forward, but it's also like going back to your old Dave.
Totally. I mean, can I tell you, that's how I feel about my whole career right now. Mm-hmm. Literally like everything I do that is what I used to do, except for stand-up, just like literally the doing of stand-up, I don't want to do. Like everything.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I feel like, you know what there's a global shift happening in so many ways. We're all coming out of this weird pandemic.
Yeah.
And like, we can't just go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
Like they basically stopped at the entire world, gave people money to stay at home, some people. And now we're trying to readjust to like the realness of everything. And everything is slightly different.
Right.
It's like you woke up in a superhero movie where like the world is recreated, but you're like, something's off.
Yeah.
Totally. And you can't put your finger on it. It's not changing. We still have to eat. We're still doing the normal things. But you look around at what your goals were, and I can't frame my current goals based on the old way or my old goals based on the new. It's like I have to start over, except for stand-up. The stand-up part still works.
Right.
Like doing the stand-up. But how you do it has changed. Like, I'm having like a crisis. Like, do I want to be a clipping comedian or not? Do I want to be a guy who does that?
Oh my God, let's talk about that. That's what we were talking about in New York.
Yeah.
What's funny is that like I was about to say I'm done being a clipping comedian, and that's just totally not true. Mm-hmm. But I am done. I was telling you during that conversation that I spent the pandemic trying to make being a comedy small business work in quarantine.
That's right.
And clipping is part of that. And clipping is also just sort of a good way to describe what that type of small business is. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of like tiny pieces of content that ideally relate to one another and feed into one another and are consumable in a way that they cost nothing, but then direct people towards things that cost, whether it be a Patreon or your merch or an album you're selling or whatever. And I was very much doing that. And I honestly think I did pretty well. I didn't turn myself into one of those people that's like a fucking millionaire or like makes their living off of TikTok or something. And I don't think I'll ever be, I'll never understand how to do that. But I had a merch store. I worked really hard on developing merch and having the merch relate to each other and relate to my albums and stuff. And then I was like digging through old stand-up recordings and turning them in. I like put out a 7-inch, which is a 45-inch record that was like a single that I also released digitally. And I put out a
like what was on the 7-inch? Like 2 jokes?
It was it was like an intro track that I recorded in my room and then one stand-up joke. Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Totally, yeah. Well, and I actually like had sort of planned that. My album came out in 2019. I recorded it at the Echo at the beginning of 2019. It came out at the end of 2019, and then I started like touring on it basically. But in the recording there was one joke that it went well. It did very well. But
it's not just like your intro and welcome Dave Ross.
Dude, I mean, honestly,
hey guys, how you doing tonight? And it just starts to fade out.
my feeling about releases now is fucking do that. I think releases are so cool and they're almost like a separate type of art that like do it.
You mean like
a 7-inch itself,
7-inch, yeah.
Vinyl, a tape, a
CD,
CD,
you see Dave Waite
whatever.
did like I don't know if that's real or not. I didn't ask him yet, but I saw he did like an Instagram video of his comedy tape.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if that's real, if he's making a joke, but like
it is real. Yeah.
I don't even know where he would make tapes.
Oh, I can tell you.
Is he sitting at home with like a dub and a record? And it's like high speed dubbing.
Oh my God, I fucking hope so. I don't think so though. I think that I mean, I got a tape guy. My album's out on tape. I love that shit, man. I mean, well, that's a whole other thing.
But being clipping, we'll come back to that.
So I put out like a comedian's equivalent of a B-sides album. I found an old recording and put it out for free on Bandcamp, or pay what you want on Bandcamp. And then I had a solo podcast with a Patreon, and on that Patreon I had its own podcast, and there were levels, and one of the levels was merch. Mm-hmm. And then I started a separate like merch thing off some jokes I was doing. Anyway, and it was working. And it's so funny. And I was like, I had a podcast at the beginning of quarantine that was going pretty well, that had enough fans that really cared, that in like a few big cities I could fill up a small room on my own. And I left that podcast at the beginning of quarantine because podcasting in quarantine is so hard, and it also felt like time to go, and it had been, and blah blah blah. And so
if any time is time to like stop, that's the time,
right? So,
but that's good. Like what you're saying, which is like going through existing assets and trying to monetize them first. Yeah, it's like a big philosophy of the music business where I come from, which is like go through your catalog, make the best ofs, make sure everything you have to date is making money, while you're making new stuff,
right. And I also had that audience from that last podcast that I stuck at home was like, well, it was this weird conflict of like business and my own mental health, that it was tough because 10,000 people an episode listened to that last podcast.
That's a lot.
And so giving it up was, in a business sense, stupid, because we also had a Patreon that was going well, but I was like losing my mind, and it was quarantine, and it felt like time. And so I did it. And that's a theme in my life, business versus
You could always bring
health.
it up.
Well,
I mean, sorry, bring it back.
It's with another guy.
Okay.
And so he would have to want to, and maybe we will. I don't know. And but it's like harder when both of you have to decide to do it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we wouldn't, or that it's like bad blood or something. It's not.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, I had the audience from that. and then making all this stuff on my own that was like some free, some monetized. I did all that in order to hopefully retain some of that audience and grow a new one. And so I think that I successfully retained some of the audience and grew it the tiniest fraction of a bit.
Hey, with a big change, that's like all you could hope for.
Honestly, looking back, I'm so proud. And also that like direct connection, the way that all of those things work, Patreon, Instagram, clips and shit, it's a direct relationship with your fans. Until you get to be one of those people that makes a massive Patreon living, then you have no idea. But I like know them. It was somewhere between 100 and 200 patrons I had, maybe even less. I'm not sure. But like either way, I knew their names.
Yeah.
And
they're real people.
Totally.
Yeah.
I had a Twitch show and I would see them in the chat. You know what I mean? So anyway, yeah. I didn't like churn it into being some sort of internet famous person, but I had an audience and it worked and it felt great. I loved them and I loved it. And now I'm like, fuck that. And that's where I'm at. The pandemic ended and I'm proud of it and I feel good about it and what I did. But I'm like,
fuck being this solo business guy, everything all the time.
Yeah, like I think that it was good for a time for me, but I wasn't happy is the reality.
Right.
Yeah. And I do. And there's a certain part of it that's like, hey man, shut up. Fuck you. It worked a little. So stop complaining and just do it. Oh, you weren't happy? Boo fucking who,
right.
But it's just real.
If you're going to be consistent at something every week, you got to like it.
You got to like it.
Do you know Tim Ferriss, or you heard of him? That he's like he's a big podcast, a lot of self-help stuff and just book reviews. Like it's one of the biggest pods, but he doesn't do the clickbaity YouTube thing. Like you'll never guess what so-and-so said or doesn't do reaction videos. Doesn't really do YouTube. And he's like, I could have a podcast twice as big if I did that. He's like, for me, it just doesn't work. It's not what I want to do.
That's exactly how I feel.
He created a system. He's like, this is how I like to do it. He's like, I want my content to be more evergreen, less, because YouTube's a huge search engine.
Right.
So, and I don't do it either. And I always kick myself like, oh, should I chop this up and be like, you'll never guess what Dave Ross said about the Kardashians.
Right.
Even though me saying the Kardashians is the only thing that's been mentioned. Like that's how clickbaity it gets now.
Right.
And I just don't want to do that.
Right.
And I think that's okay.
It's more than okay, man. Especially I think if what you think of yourself as is a comedian. If you're
a YouTuber.
If you're a YouTuber or if you just literally are interested in developing yourself as a business in that way, then great.
Oh yeah, and I'm not knocking it. Some people will be great comedians who love making fun clickbait.
Right.
And that's for that, and that's cool. That's great too.
Right.
We can all be our own selves, and we get so much anxiety, kind of what we were talking about earlier, from looking at other people and being like, am I not doing something right?
Right. Well, I think also I was a victim of like money worries. We're trapped at home and I was like, how do I make money with what I have, And so that's probably another reason I was unhappy, because I was really worried all the fucking time. And also, quarantine sucked.
Yeah.
It was hard.
And you were in LA or New York?
LA.
Okay.
LA was weirdly very stressful, even though we had outdoor space.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lonely town when it's open.
Right.
Which is weird, because it's like you're not around people.
Right.
Anyway.
And the loneliness of it, the lack of interaction with other human beings, I think makes us all catastrophize a little bit more. And so we were all stressed out. Everyone was real worried. Yeah.
I mean, I did a pod with Caleb during the height of it. And like I went to his house and I had like a Ziploc bag and I put the sterilized mic in here. I'm like, you recorded this, I'll call you. And then I drove back home and then we did it over Zoom. And then I drove back, picked up the mic, this recorder, sterilized. Like the paranoia level, like in March of 2020 or crazy. April, whenever it was like, it was up there.
Yeah. It was bad. And so that contributed too. And So I don't know. I guess like right now I'm sort of hesitating to knock it. But the reality is that I did it for a bunch of reasons, some of which were things I liked. But because of all that, I did some stuff I don't think I would normally do. I I don't really like, I'm down to make clips because you got to promote yourself, and I'm down. I realize that you have to get the word out about yourself literally
all the time,
so people will find out about you at all.
Yeah.
But there are certain concessions I don't really want to make. And the sort of like leading thing, I don't like the idea of making a clip with the title at the top. There's something about that makes me feel
like
fake.
Black t-shirts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even if that just is what the bit is, for me, that doesn't feel right. Doing the thing where in the comments it's like, man, this happened the first time I ever heard the first Wu-Tang album. What's your favorite Wu-Tang album?
Oh, like encourage.
Drop it in the comments. There's something about that type of relationship with fans. I'm here to make stuff and have people consume it and like it, ideally like it, right? And that's how what I would like my relationship to my fans to be.
Yeah.
And so I liked that part of it. But I see myself going down this road of really worrying about being monetized and all that shit. And I don't like the feeling.
I 100% agree.
And so now I'm like, and then you combine that with another thing, which is that I'm a comedian, and we all get caught up in this. We see what other people do, and like, shit, I'm at a point, comedy's really fucked up because you get attention and you get work for a long time before you make enough money to live.
Yeah.
And so you have to do this weird balancing act of like, well, I have all these opportunities and all these things I could do that don't really make enough money.
Or break even.
But they take way more time than I have if I have a day job.
Right.
So it's like trying to do that. And I realized coming out of the pandemic for me that like leaning into the stuff that makes money just because it was comedy and it made me some money detracts from learning comedy for me. My goal in this is to be great. I think that I'm good. And that's hard to even say because I don't want to be self-aggrandizing at all. I think I'm good now. I've been around about 12 years. I think I'm good. I worked hard, and it's showing some. Maybe a lot. I don't know.
It's showing
maybe
a lot.
not at all.
No.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I want to be great, man. I want to make great shit, and I want the things I release as individual pieces of work to be great. And I like one of the things that made me realize this was I started touring coming out of the pandemic. I did my first club weekend, and I think I did my job. I think people left having seen a good show. I don't think people left having seen a great show. Obviously my hour is a work in progress right now. Everybody's is.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel good about that. I also put out an album and I burned that whole, I don't do any of that material now. And again, that's just like a way that I approach this. I feel like I am.
That's kind of standard.
It's not though. Like a lot of comedians, because they see that, like they're such headliners that they're like, this is my job. I want to crush for them. So I'm going to at least open and close with something off my album if I don't have a full hour. And I think that's a very respectable way to be.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to write new shit if I do any of it.
Right.
So I'm up there with only like 2 bits that I had gotten to a place of being solid pre-pandemic. I'd thrown everything else away, and the rest I'd written in quarantine. And I'm doing a fucking hour, right. And so I'm doing a lot of crowd work, and I'm fucking around. Weird. Yeah, exactly. and so I just came out of that like, man, it also makes me nervous, and I want to do well for them. So I'm up on stage just pushing from my soul at them, trying to make them laugh with every fiber of my being while not doing old shit. And I was like,
that's how you get the new act though.
Yes, but it's not how you learn more about your own comedy. I was so anxious in doing, at least again,
that's interesting. Yeah.
At least this is only how I feel for me.
Yeah.
I just really felt that way, man. I felt like, and that is how I was building a new hour pre-pandemic. And it would work. I would come out of it with a new hour. But there's a lot of stress and anxiety being a headliner for me because I'm the show. They paid.
Yeah, you're the entertainment for the evening.
and I'm not famous. So not only have they showed up paying, they've showed up with no context for me.
Yeah.
So like, I don't get any fucking leeway. The feature and the host get leeway because they're early in the show and they're like, oh, well, yeah, but they're not the show.
Yeah.
And then a famous person gets leeway because they already are interested in what they have to say.
And you're hanging out with someone famous, even if it doesn't work out.
Or they're not famous and you already have their album and you like love them, you know? Like, I don't know if you've ever been to a Kyle Kinane show. It's fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah, not a whole show of his.
So, dude, first of all, if you ever get a chance to see him do an hour, do it, because he's one of the best ever. But also, his fans are specific to him. And Segura's like this, too.
Right. That's what we all want.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Where, like, you can see, before the show even starts, there's people just like, oh, they're all amped. They're, like, getting drunk already. They're like, we're going to laugh so fucking hard, dude. It's like, it's crazy.
They bought tickets 6 months ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not in either of those places. And so I feel this like, I got to really do this work. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
And that anxiety is there. And so I really like push to make where I'm at now work for them. But I feel in me with yet more work, a real like growth of skill. I can feel my potential. And doing comedy that way blocks me from getting there. And so I literally, that's literally, I
and when you
believe that.
When you say what blocks you from doing there is like doing the other things?
It's the anxiety.
The anxiety
it's the,
blocks.
like,
okay.
the anxiety and the feeling that I owe the audience something. And, and you know, maybe it's actually just specific to where I'm at in stand-up now. But I like, not long after that weekend, I went to New York City. And in New York City, I saw you. Mm-hmm. And actually, I saw you halfway through my trip there. And I don't know how much we talked about it, but I wasn't feeling good about my sets when I met up with you.
Okay.
Because New York doesn't fucking lie to you.
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's every different type of show. I did Brooklyn shows. I did club shows. I did packed shows.
You know where your
shows.
act's at after a week in New York.
Totally.
Yeah.
And after the first week, I was like, you know, I had some good sets, but I didn't have any great sets, and I had some bombs.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I want to be better than this. But then, like, the sets started stacking up, and by one more week in, I felt sharper in stand-up than I'd felt in my whole life.
I would say the same after that New York trip. It's just, that's what New York does to you. That's why New York comedy is so great.
Yeah, totally. But the other thing it doesn't lie to you, but the fact that it's short sets and no one gives a shit about you also means that it's totally low pressure, at least for me. So I was going up, and by the end, like, the sharper I felt, the more confident I felt.
The more relaxed.
And none of it was I the star of the show. It felt like I was just going to the gym every day, all day.
Yeah.
And I just truly feel like if I want to be a great comedian, it's time to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And in every way. And so, like, all of these projects that took up my time, headlining that takes up my brain space and my anxiety, literally, man, it's all off my plate. And it's just so funny to me to look at. Like, I'm not really that unsuccessful at being a comedy small business.
Yeah.
But I was like, get out of here. Done. Fuck that.
Well, how could, like, if we're spending our time doing, like, there's two different models here, which you kind of outlined, which I think is very interesting. There's the one where it's like, I'm focusing on the craft of being a great comedian.
Yes.
And I support myself with a job. There's two me's.
Right.
Job me and comedy me. And this could not necessarily be you. This could be anybody. Or you're the guy who's doing every little thing. I'm clipping. I'm making a podcast. I'm figuring out how to headline. I'm figuring out how to monetize every little bit of my comedy.
Yeah.
But are you now getting good at 7 to 10 things and not being a great? Like,
right.
If you want to be, like what you're saying, a great, like one of the greats.
Right.
Is doing 10 things the way to get there? For some people, yes. For some people, no. I would argue that it's hard to do 10 things well.
I couldn't agree more. And I feel like you and I are probably similar in that we want to do 10 things very well and think about, like, I have ideas all day for a podcast this or that or this or a way to
I even thought during
things.
this, like, what podcast can you and I do together?
Right.
Like, which is the exact opposite of what
we're talking about. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I have been that guy a long time. That's how and it really, I'll also say this. If you're listening and you're a young comic, especially in LA, don't do what I'm doing right now. this advice for an LA comic coming up isn't necessarily right. It could be, depending on who you are. But for me, I went up every single day, as many sets as I could every day. But I also had a sketch group, 2 podcasts, and a live show and an open mic. And I did it all to both get myself out there, but also like just get good at the idea of comedy at all, you know? And it did both of those things. In LA, stage time is hard to come by, and you got to do what you got to do to get that stage time and remind other people that you exist so they give you that stage time.
Yeah.
And you also got to get fucking good enough at all to not bomb on the stage time you get, so you keep getting that stage time that you got.
Right, while working on the new stuff.
Yeah, and while just generally trying to get better at stand-up. Yeah. And like, you just got to be a little bit more creative with how you get your name out there and get better at stand-up in Los Angeles. And so I did all that, and it worked for me. And so it's been like, that's why I reacted to quarantine the way I did, by making a fucking billion things, a Twitch show, and every
you were going back to like beta Dave.
How my brain has worked for 10 years. And it's been, I've had to like put effort into allowing myself to not do things, because I also do think that at a certain point, rest and breathing room, and like time to think is more beneficial to you than overloading yourself with work.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's a meeting. Investing is one of my other passions, and I go to this Berkshire Hathaway meeting every year, which is until the pandemic, which is Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, and they talk about investing, but mostly it's like going to church. They don't tell you like buy this stock. They just give you philosophies, and it kind of regrounds you in that. But they start talking about, like, at some point Charlie was talking about Warren Buffett's day. He's like, let's compare Warren Buffett's day to Bill Gates. Bill Gates' schedule says 7:05, brush teeth, 7:10, brush hair. Like, it's to the minute.
Right.
Warren's schedule for the whole week, it'll be like Thursday, haircut. And like, that's it.
Yeah,
like,
that's the life I want.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So he's keeping his brain free to read and develop the ideas that are the most important.
Yeah.
And like, obviously one works for Bill Gates. He's also a billionaire, and one works for him. And so like, if you're wired the way we're talking about, where you need that free time, that is powerful. And that's almost like a superpower, to give yourself the space to be the best of those small things. And it led to something else he said subsequently, which was, write down the 25 things you want to do the most in your life. Write down all 25, and then cross out like the bottom 20.
Wow.
And it's like, these are not the ones you don't do. These are the ones you avoid at all costs, because those will distract you from your top 5.
Oh, wow.
And that really stuck with me too. It's like, oh yeah, we can so easily.
Right.
And that's why we struggle with these things. Like, I was in the same place with you and your shows as with my show. Was it the past? Do I bring it back?
Yeah.
I tied it up on a bow and it was done post-pandemic.
Yeah.
Because people tell me to bring it back. Should I bring it back?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I mean, I do think that of all of the sound advice you could get from somebody in the LA comedy scene, probably the most important thing is to listen to yourself.
Yes.
And I'm going to say definitely. And also, definitely the most important thing is to listen to yourself. I also realize that is a thing that people say all the time and sounds kind of corny, to just listen to yourself. It sounds like almost a throwaway, like a fortune cookie thing.
Yeah, listen to yourself, except when you're hungry.
Be yourself, shit like that. But it's
how do you be yourself if you don't know who you are?
Right. Oh, whoa, man, we should lay down. The problem is that it's much more difficult to listen to yourself in LA comedy than one would think. And you could even think you're listening to yourself and not be for years.
Yeah.
Because like, not only are you surrounded by thousands of comedians all the time, because what we do is so social and public, but comedians, by nature of standing in front of an audience with a fucking microphone, and our relationship to that audience is they listen, and if they talk, we yell at them. Comedians are fucking convinced that our feelings and opinions matter.
Right.
They kind of don't. because we're just people.
Right.
And we're dealing with this with famous comedians right now,
we're dealing with like pretty much all Americans now.
Like that's true. Everyone has a voice.
Yeah. We all matter. We all...
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so everybody in comedy truly believes that their path and their strategies are the best ones, and they'll say them at you with confidence, and it's because they care, a lot of them, you know? And so you want to listen. And so, like, a lot of the times they'll be right for you, but sometimes they'll be wrong. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, like, if you really feel something and people keep telling you to do the opposite thing, you got, like, okay, for example, Good Heroin. On paper, and objectively almost, it would be a bad idea for me to leave the show. It is definitely hard to get stage time in Los Angeles. It just is.
Yeah.
And I have a show that's weekly that just fills up. And the crowd knows me. So, like, they do have that context for me. It's not...
You're building a fan base.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not the same as if I am Bill Burr or whatever. But, like, yeah, that's a place where not everybody, but a good portion of the crowd knows me, and they, like, will give me leeway. And I've had people come up to me at the show and say, one guy in particular was like, oh man, tonight was the third time you did that story about Fresno, and it's been really cool to see it develop. Like, that's a perfect situation.
Yeah.
And
because good crowds let you explore, and bad crowds help you edit.
Oh, interesting. That's a good turn of
phrase. I
think
that's somebody's, like some famous comedians.
Latif Tayour.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like, it could be even Seinfeld. It's like one of those.
Oh, okay.
Those big ones.
So, and again, it's there every week, and it reminds people of me, and it's fun, and I love the venue, and I do it with my friends. Like, everything about it's good. And but I just, like, you know, we did the first one. And again, it was packed. It was just packed after having not done it for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I had great sets, and it was fun. But the whole time, I just had this sinking feeling like it just doesn't feel right.
Right. Here's a new one. Here's one that I'll say is mine. Yeah. You know you have a good show when you hate yourself before and after, but you had a great time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's like, I'm still wondering, like, and I've brought this up to a bunch of comedians. I've been like, I'm thinking about leaving, just passing it on, and they're all like, you idiot. Yeah. What is wrong with you? JF Harris, like, stopped me, and he was like, Dave, this is stupid.
Yeah.
But it's just sort of like, I don't know, there's a time for things.
Right.
And if it starts to waste away in my mind, like, objectively now, it's stupid for me to leave.
Do you just walk up? Like, do you walk up when the show's ready?
No, I have someone bring me up.
No, I'm saying, like, you don't have to set up chairs.
Oh,
you
yeah.
Don't have to...
Yeah, totally. We have a producer who does everything.
So,
this is what JF was saying. But even then, like, it's hard to explain. Yes.
It's not. I get it.
The reality is there are basically no downsides.
Yeah.
Except that I've been doing it a long time. And for how I feel about comedy and life, I am ready to move on to the next chapter. And so rereading the last chapter kind of affects the rest of my life too.
Yeah. What if you didn't host?
Yeah, right. Well, here's what I'm going to do. It's my show, and my friends still run it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to leave and pass it on, and they'll still put me up a lot.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to do that.
Right.
Yeah. And because, like, you understand this, right? Like, if you don't run a show that people want to do, it's hard to relate to this. But, like, the thing that sticks with me that's tough is, like, I want to remove the context of me as a comedian from including that show. That's what I want.
Yes.
That's
100%.
When I'm in a room, there's no better feeling than you do a great show and you kill with everyone, right? Especially if you've never met. Now, I'll never forget the first year I did Bridgetown. I was a really young comedian, and or maybe it was the second time, but anyway, I was a really young comedian, and there was an open mic at Bridgetown too, which was such a cool extra detail. It was back then at Bridgetown, it was all on the same street, all the venues. So everyone would just pop around and see each other all day. And everyone back then was also so obsessed with stand-up that all the stand-ups on Bridgetown, whenever they had free time, they would just pop over to the mic. And, like, Hannibal hosted the mic at one point. Ron Lynch would always host all night one night. And the last night, everyone was already at the after party.
Hannibal's a good example of someone who had a big show that was tied to him, but didn't in any way involve one conversation. It wasn't a one line Hannibal who has that show.
Right. It
was Hannibal who has the show.
He is the Warren Buffett in that example. He has like a lot of stories of him saying no to things just because he didn't want to. Yeah. And I think
he bought real estate or something. Like he's a smart investor too. Like so there's another Warren Buffett parallel with him. Like he's a guy who just blazed his own path.
So right.
I think I don't know him at all. Never met him, but he
also just does seem chill.
He does seem chill
in every way.
I don't know if he still does it, but he had a podcast where he like makes music at the beginning.
Oh, that's cool.
I was like, oh, this is great.
What an interesting guy.
He'll like make a beat as this thing starts and has like a theremin, and then the guest comes on and he'll do it kind of when they're there too.
Oh, cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So everyone was already at the after party, and I like wanted to do one more set, so I went to the mic. And the comics on the mic, where it was packed with people that were probably not like ticket holders to the festival. That was the other cool thing about the mic. People who couldn't buy tickets could see Hannibal and shit, right?
Yeah.
It was like midnight, last night of the festival. People were already going to the parties, and the lineup was me, Richard Bain, Emily Heller, and Dave Anthony. We all went up in a row, and we all smashed, all of us. And I still feel bonded to them from that. And, you know, it was definitely amplified by the fact that I was 2 years in or whatever. But we all crushed, and we were like, wow, we all crushed. Yeah. It was like a special thing. If they had found out that I booked Good Heroin during that feeling of being bonded to them where we all crush, it would have poisoned it. And that's fine for a while.
The mere fact of them knowing, or because once they asked to do it?
Like, I guess at this point for me now, them knowing. It's just them knowing it all. Yeah. I don't want it to factor in. I don't want it to be a part of it. If like... And it didn't matter back then. I had Holy Fuck back then, and I wanted them to know because I was a young comic with a show. I wanted them on it.
Yeah.
But now that I'm an established comedian and I've been doing that for a long time, that part of it, I'm ready to be done with it, man.
Yeah.
I just don't want it to be a part of my comedy life.
You don't have, as someone like who's not you looking in, you have much less of the Dave is a guy who has a show than pretty much most people.
Well, that's good. I still feel it though. It's,
of course, because you do it. You're not going to stop feeling it until you burn it all down.
Exactly. And yeah, I don't know. I do look at this a lot. Like, is this just a way that I am? Is this a toxic thing for me that I do? And I guess toxic's the wrong word because toxic sounds so horrible, but like, is it detrimental to me for me to be like this? Because I've always been this way and people have always given me shit for it. Holy Fuck was my show that I had at that theater. It ran for 3.5 years, and I ended it. And man, of all the things I've done and ended, that one was the most objectively bad decision because I was 4 years into stand-up. The last show of Holy Fuck, it's a 200-seat theater, 700 people came. There was a line.
What?
Yeah, dude. It was a free show. The lineup was Mark Maron and Patton Oswalt, but I didn't even
announce them.
I didn't even announce the lineup, and 700
people.
I had a guest list of 100, and they didn't get all get in.
Wow!
And like there were comedians going outside and standing on the street and doing stand up for the line because a lot of the line didn't get in, and we went until 1 a.m.
It's like Coachella for.
It was crazy, dude. Yeah, I was like pulling names out of I just like
Holy Fuck is right.
Yeah, dude, it was great.
Bring Holy Fuck back.
Yeah, you know, I feel like we might, but like it's me and Jeff Wadenhofer, and one day down the road, I think some more years would have to pass, but it was fun. But yeah, I just was like, it's time.
Do you feel that like every 4 years you reinvent yourself?
So that's the thing, is that as much as I do feel like I have to listen to myself, and it's good to move on and not get like if something is like chipping away at you, it's time to go. I do wonder if this is just a way I am and I should try to reel it in.
I
don't know.
I think it's a gift and a curse because I am also like that. Like time goes on and I'm like, what's next?
Right. That's exactly what it is.
Even if what I'm currently doing hasn't gotten to my dream of where I wanted it to go.
Right.
This next thing, I sometimes feel that if I add that together, they will get me there now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's right or a way to be, but that's just like kind of how I am.
You know, I think what another thing is with Good Heroin, and this relates to what you were just saying, is that like, I don't feel like I can put my back into Good Heroin. Like, to what you just said, I do see the opportunity for growth, and then it could get bigger and be a bigger part of me, and I could be a bigger part of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's not at the end of its possible road, like you were saying. So it might be silly to let it go. But in order to get something to the next level, you got to put your back into it. You got to really, and
like Meltdown, like remember when Meltdown became a TV show?
Right.
You're like, okay, well, that's really taking it all the way.
And also, so Meltdown was called Comedy Meltdown before that, and it was a monthly only hosted by Jonah. And it ended. He like ended it. And then Kumail moved, and they were like, oh, and then like Hardwick bought the theater, and it all sort of came together. Pete Holmes moved to town and started You Made It Weird, and it was also on the network, and all these things were happening. And they were like, oh, maybe we start it back up. But Jonah had like put it away. Mm-hmm. And had there not been all of this new life injected into that space in the show, they probably wouldn't have done it. And then TV show, and then it was like, okay, well, that's clearly the end of the book or whatever.
Yeah, that's all the way. Right. I mean, like, what do you do after that?
Totally. Get it to be a bigger TV show? Like,
yeah. I think, like, sometimes your thing can just, or not you specifically, but the thing that we're all doing, it's okay if it's just the mom and pop coffee shop.
Right.
It always makes money.
Totally.
Always serves great coffee. It'll never be Starbucks. And that's okay.
It is totally okay. That's totally okay. And I definitely that's the part that I need some coaching on being comfortable with, because stand-up will always be like that with me. I really love it. And that's a cool thing about quarantine.
Yeah, and you can do it forever. I
can do it for free forever. Right. I love it.
Has Bill Burr done your show?
No.
Right, but he could walk up one day and be like, can I do it?
Totally.
And he's done shows like yours around town.
Yeah.
So it's like what you're doing is also evergreen, because it's something that people at all levels to the very top will want to do.
Well, here's the thing that complicates it, though. And the reason I'm pretty positive I'm going to leave is that, like, I'm going to be here still some, but I'm going to move to New York.
Congrats.
Thanks. Just because of everything I've said.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm looking for a change. I'm looking to go to the gym. I'm looking to focus on stand-up. All of those things mean New York to me. My girlfriend's here and she's not moving. And so I'm going to be bi-coastal. So I'll still be here. And that's why I'll still do Good Heroin regularly. I won't be here all the time. It makes it easy for them to put me up when I'm here.
Yeah.
But not being here all the time, you know. But I'll also say this. I do think, like, even if it stays a mom and pop coffee shop, an event, a piece of art does need to contain the feeling of growth, even if it's slight growth, even if growth isn't really growth in size, it's just evolution.
Yeah.
In order for it to stay fresh and be great. I really feel like that's true. Yeah. And so
especially in LA, where things have like a light, like every time you drive by a new place in Los Angeles, it's got like a new club name. You're like, oh, yeah, right. It lasts like 3 years. You're like,
right.
It's now like Hoochie's. And you're like, all right, cool.
Totally. I mean, there's some exceptions like Dupars or whatever.
That's not a club.
Like the old, no, but like that's things that don't evolve in LA.
And like, you know what? That's my favorite stuff in LA. The Dupars, the Coral Cafe in Burbank, like these places that have just been there for like 50 years.
Yeah, that old. I was actually Kibitz is one of those places.
Kibitz too.
Kibitz and what's the name of the diner? I love it. How do I not remember?
Swingers.
The name? No, it's attached to Kibitz. It's
Canners.
Canners, right? Yeah, those. It's like rare Hollywood history.
Greenblatt's next to the Laugh Factory.
My god!
Now that that's gone, like that's
is it gone?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think they lasted 99 years or something.
Oh my god! I'll never eat corned beef again or whatever.
Yeah, but no, you are. That's just capitalism. It's got to grow or die.
Yeah,
and we all feel that pressure continuously. But
so I feel like maybe it's time to like hand it off. So like, holy fuck, I was like done, end it. And then I like talked to some young comics and like passed off the time to them, and they started their own thing that was called Sleepaway Camp. It was crazy.
Well, if you end it, I'll miss the artwork. You guys have some of the best artwork in the game.
We're not going to end it. Catherine, who produces it, has it, but I think it's time for some other people to run. Or I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind. But everything I've said is just really making me feel like it's time to move on, because it is like, I think if I weren't moving, I would be like, shut the fuck up, Dave.
Yeah.
Just keep your damn show. You don't have to do anything except show up and just fucking do it.
Maybe you're moving to make the decision for you.
Maybe I am. Yeah, maybe I'm that crazy. Maybe I'm like that.
Well, you're not going
level.
to Milwaukee. You're going to New York, the stand-up mecca, so to speak.
But it also is legitimately like, I don't even really know if I want to host anymore. This is how I feel about stand-up. I'm like, I have my podcast with Caleb Synan that I love.
Yeah.
And then I have doing stand-up that I love. And these two things I have complete faith in. And I have never really felt that way about a podcast. Even the ones that I knew were good, I didn't have. But this one, I'm like, this is funny. This is funny. I know it's good. We love it. So like, we're investing fully in it. For that, we are like, I hate doing it because it's just work. But I don't mind because I have faith in the show. We're making clips. We literally, we signed a lease on an office. We have an office with like 2 leather chairs in it where we shoot
the one that's
our
on
podcast.
the IG now?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it looks great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And we have like a desk with a computer and like a little merch
Tell
set
them
up.
what it's called. Tell the people
It's literally, the podcast is called What's It Called?
Okay.
The concept is that we don't know what our podcast is called. So it's just a podcast where two comedians fuck
Two friends
around,
and comedians
really.
talk.
Yeah, and there's like games. We like rename shit, and we'll like post online what we're renaming, and people chime in. So there's shit we do, but it's really just the Dave and Caleb Being Funny Show. And which, what a name, the Dave and Caleb Being Funny Show.
Right.
No, like,
that's when you reinvent it in 4 years. You change it.
And really, it is also we also do a lot of like, we don't know what our fucking show is called. What could it be called? And we'll like joke around about what it is and come up with a name.
The two people who are comics show is now become the most powerful way to build the audience.
But also
people
the
like
hardest.
You. Right.
Yes.
Because you don't have the guests to spike you up.
You don't have the guest. You also don't have the fucking theme to like allow people to find you right away.
Yeah.
Which helps a great deal. You know,
but
like,
once they find you, they're in.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why we're like,
it's stickier.
We are investing. Yeah. We got an office. We shoot it. We have, and so we sit.
I like that you call it office and not studio.
Dude,
it's an office. This is real business.
We have when we record the podcast, it's an 8-hour workday.
What?
Dude. We show up at 10 a.m.
Bagels?
We shoot, dude, truly. We have a fridge that has like
petty cash for donuts. All right, donuts were $9.50. Put it in.
I think we kind of do. Like we don't record it that way, but yeah. We show up at 10 a.m. We shoot and record our podcast and our Patreon episode, and then we sit together and we edit the audio and video versions of both of those. We make sure they're uploaded and scheduled to go up on Monday. Then we pull out clips and format them for YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram and Facebook, and caption them all. And then we upload them to our phones so they're ready to go so we can post them throughout the week. We just do it together once a week.
That's amazing. That's how everyone should. You just changed my life. Because here's what I do.
Yeah.
I'll record this, and then the night before I'm supposed to post it, I'll panic. I won't do it, and then I'll post it a day late.
Right. And that's how I did it all of quarantine. And that's why, like, what's funny is that, like, I'm the more, like, software savvy of us. Caleb's very savvy with that shit, but I, like, was a web developer, and it's, like, my equipment. So I do it, and he sits there, and he's, like, in doing it with me, like, learning how to do it as well. But it's really, I'm doing it and he's with me.
He's like moral support.
But him being there is why I'm able to do it. If he weren't sitting there, I would do that. It would take me a week and I would panic and it would suck.
Right.
But we were able
to worry about it more than actually the time I spent worrying about it is longer than me doing it.
And the worry itself makes it harder to do other work.
Yeah.
Totally. It's just like the most ridiculous.
I am 100% using that method now. I'll invite Caleb over to sit as well.
Truly, you could pay someone on Fiverr just to be in the room and like, I'm going to pay you to learn how to do this. You never have to do it. You just have to sit with me and learn, and it'll force you to have a work day.
I paid like a hall monitor for your life. He just sits there and makes you feel guilty.
Yeah. I mean, what is a life coach except someone that
can't get their own life together?
Right. Yeah. Tells you to do the things they should do.
Every time I see a life coach, I'm like, your shit isn't together.
There's no way.
Yeah.
Every therapists have therapists, you know?
Well, I think therapy is a little bit more scholastic.
Sure.
But like
than a life coach.
A life
100%.
coach is someone who didn't succeed at other things.
Yeah.
And now decides that this is what they're going to be.
Right. I mean, there's probably exceptions to that rule.
Of course there are, but
like, you know, it's like people whose job is telling rich people how to organize their closet. This is a job, like an organization specialist for people
but don't they come in and like build shit, like California closets? They like build stuff.
Oh, I didn't think so. I thought it was like a very it was more like they're the architect. They don't actually do the building.
But they hire people to do it, right?
Right.
It's
like a closet contractor.
But yeah, exactly. They're selling a product.
I love that you're like, fuck life coaches, but
closets.
Listen, Dave, don't talk shit about closet organization
closet world
specialists.
Well, no, because I didn't have a closet. Like when we had to do a little remodel, we had someone, not a closet specialist, but they came in and put shelves up so it could be organized.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And it was great. It was life changing. It was life coach.
Oh, wow.
It was my life coach.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, yeah. So I've picked these two things that I feel like I really love and have faith in to really invest in. And so I am, because I've been this millions of projects guy, I'm like really making an effort to be like, remove these other things, you know?
Yeah.
And that's also part of letting Good Heroin go.
You know what? You naturally wrapped up, because the two things we usually end on are like, what's the goals, which you outlined, and then what would in your life is my other question, would you take away?
Oh, funny.
To get the other things.
Holy shit.
So we're locked in.
Well, thanks for doing my podcast. Yeah, this is my podcast now.
Yeah, it's yours now. I'm handing it off to you.
Perfect.
And
it's called Good Heroin.
It's called the Good Heroin Podcast. Everything must be one brand or you don't know what you're doing. Tell people your socials. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, man. Thank you. This was so fun.
Yeah.
I'm at Dave to the Ross on everything. DAVETOTHEROSS. My website's Dave to the Ross. Yeah, What's It Called is my podcast. It's honestly so fun.
It is very funny.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I have a website, and on there you can find links to my merch and my albums and to What's It Called or whatever. And, you know, we are sort of in a pandemic, sort of out. All types of like following and sharing or buying or whatever, free or money, are all support. So any of that you want to do, I appreciate. And I also urge you to do that with any artist you love. Like to never, I feel like we're in this weird era where the people's audience is similarly stressed out because we're all trying to make a living.
Yeah.
When you're like looking at a Twitch chat, it's a lot of people being like, sorry, I can't donate this week. It's a lot of people messaging artists they're fans of and being like, I had to take down my Patreon subscription. I'm sorry. And it's like, we're all trying to fucking do this. If all you can give is free, a follow is dope.
A follow is dope.
It's just dope.
It is funny how like follows are dope. It's easy. It's free. And still some people are like, no.
Right.
Like, no.
Yeah.
This could help this person, but I'm not pressing twice. Like,
totally.
What?
Yeah.
That's humans in a nutshell.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, man.